At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a modest little family saloon parked outside a corner shop in 1959. Unremarkable, almost forgettable. Yet that quiet, unassuming car carried a distinction no other Austin before it had ever held. It was the first Austin built after the war whose entire shape was designed not by the company's own team but by an Italian design house from Turin. More than 342,000 of these cars would eventually be built and sold across Britain, Australia, Italy, and even Sweden. And yet, within less than a decade, this same car vanished from British roads so completely that most people under 50 today have never even heard its name. By the end of this story, you will understand precisely why a car this popular, this well-engineered, and this quietly influential disappeared almost without a trace, and you will discover the one surprising truth behind its downfall, that it was never actually beaten by a rival brand at all. This was not a car rush to market either. Development began back in 1955 at Austin's Longbridge Works, under the internal project code AD08, with a specific goal of replacing the aging Austin A30 and A35 models that had served the company faithfully but were beginning to look distinctly old-fashioned against newer European competition. To understand why, we have to begin with the styling, because that is where this story truly starts. When the Austin A40 Farina was unveiled at the London Motor Show in October 1958, then shown again that same month in Paris and at Earl's Court in London, it stopped people in their tracks simply by looking different. Where British buyers were used to soft, rounded shapes, this car arrived with a crisp, architectural two-box silhouette and a compact drop-down boot lid in place of the usual bulky trunk. The man behind that shape, Battista Farina, known throughout the industry simply as Pininfarina, was already regarded as one of the most distinguished automotive designers in the world. And this commission marked one of the very first times a mainstream British family car had been shaped entirely by an outside Italian studio rather than an in-house British team. But here is what almost nobody realized at the time. Beneath that fresh Italian exterior, the car was mechanically identical to the older Austin A35 it was designed to replace. The front coil springs, the rear leaf springs, the brakes, the wheels, and even the speedometer and wiper motor were all carried over directly from the previous model. So while the outside promised something entirely modern, the engineering underneath remained thoroughly familiar and, in some ways, already a little dated. That contrast, between how the car looked and how it actually drove, would go on to define its entire life on British roads. Consider this figure for a moment, because it tells you everything about what this car was really built for. The original 948 cubic centimeter engine needed 35.6 seconds to reach 60 miles an hour, with a top speed of just 73 miles an hour, yet it still managed roughly 45 miles per gallon. This was never meant to be a fast car. It was built for sensibility, priced at around £676, including tax, with a heater available for an additional £20. For families finally able to afford their first proper motor car after the austerity of the post-war years, that quiet dependability mattered far more than outright speed ever could. In 1959, Austin extended the range further with the Countryman Estate, a genuinely practical variant that made weekend errands and family outings noticeably easier for ordinary households across the country. And here is a small detail that reveals just how differently these cars were built compared to what came after them. The door windows did not use a conventional window at all. Instead, they were raised and lowered by hand, using a simple finger grip built directly into the door panel, with a lock positioned right on the handle itself, a small mechanical quirk that made every single journey feel just a little distinct. The story, however, does not remain static for long. In September 1961, Austin introduced the Mark II version, and this is where the narrative becomes genuinely compelling. The wheelbase was extended by 4 inches to give rear passengers additional legroom, the front grille and dashboard were redesigned, an anti-roll bar was fitted at the front, and the brakes were finally upgraded to a fully hydraulic system, replacing the older, less dependable arrangement inherited from the A35. Then, in the autumn of 1962, a larger 1098 cubic centimeter engine was introduced, producing 48 horsepower, the very same unit found in the newly launched Morris 1100. By 1964, the dashboard received a further update, finished in a warmer wood veneer trim. On paper, every single one of these changes should have made the A40 Farina more successful than ever before. The original Mark I alone had already accounted for roughly 169,612 cars built between 1958 and 1961, a genuinely strong performance for a small family saloon in that era, which makes what happened next to the improved Mark II all the more puzzling. But here lies the twist that few people expect, and it forms the very core of this entire story. Sales of the improved Mark II actually declined compared to the original, and the cause had little to do with competitors like Ford or Morris. The real challenge came from within Austin's own family of cars. In 1962, Austin and Morris launched the 1100, a genuinely advanced small family car featuring front-wheel drive and an innovative hydroelastic suspension system, offering more interior space and a noticeably smoother ride than the Farina could ever provide. Almost overnight, standing beside its own newer sibling on the very same showroom floor, the A40 Farina began to feel cramped and outdated, even as it continued to be sold as a current model at the very same time. This is the quiet tragedy at the heart of this car's entire story. It was never overtaken by an outside rival. It was gradually and gracefully succeeded by its own family, built by the very same company, and sold through the very same dealerships across the country. There is, however, a far more fascinating side to this story that few people ever discuss today. This modest British car actually led a remarkably international life. In Sweden, the name Farina could not be used at all, because it sounded almost identical to the Swedish word for a variety of brown sugar. So the car was marketed there instead under the name Austin A40 Futura. In Australia, it was assembled locally by British Motor Corporation Australia between 1959 and 1962, built with an unusually high proportion of local content. Beyond that, the car was also assembled in the Netherlands, in New Zealand, and even in South Africa, a genuinely global footprint for what most people assumed was simply a modest little British runabout. And in Italy, the car was produced under license by Innocenti, where 67,706 examples were manufactured over the years. In 1965, Innocenti's engineers introduced something British buyers never had the chance to experience themselves, a genuine single-piece, top-hinged hatchback door, years ahead of when that design became common elsewhere in the automotive world. In fact, automotive historians now recognize the original two-box shape of the Farina, drop-down boot lid and all, as one of the earliest forerunners of the modern hatchback body style, arriving well before later cars like the Renault 16 or Austin's own Maxi would go on to claim credit for popularizing that same basic idea. This small, humble British car even found its way into popular culture. In the British comedy film The Fast Lady, the lead character takes his very first driving lesson behind the wheel of an Austin A40 Farina. And in the original Pink Panther film, the character who steals the famous dog makes his escape driving an Innocenti-built version of this very same car. By 1967, after 9 years in production, without scandal, without recall, and without a single dramatic headline, Austin quietly ended the Farina's run for good. Its final chapter was written not in newspaper columns but in steadily shrinking order books as buyers gradually gravitated toward the newer, roomier 1100 sitting right beside it on the very same forecourt. And there is something genuinely moving about an ending of that particular kind, because it means this car was never truly rejected by the public at all. It was simply outgrown, in much the same way a favorite old coat is quietly retired to the back of a wardrobe once something newer arrives, even though you remember precisely how good it once felt to wear. And perhaps that is the most honest way to remember the Austin A40 Farina, not as a failure, but as a genuinely well-loved car that simply lived out its natural lifespan before making way, quietly and without complaint, for the next generation of family motoring that it had itself helped to inspire. If you are old enough to recall seeing one of these on the road, that upright, two-box silhouette with its distinctly Italian flavor, parked outside a corner shop sometime in the 1960s, then you witnessed a quietly significant moment in British motoring history, one that helped open the door for Italian design in ordinary family cars for decades to come. Did you, or anyone in your family, ever personally own an Austin A40 Farina? And do you still remember exactly what it truly felt like behind the wheel on an ordinary Sunday drive? Share your memory in the comments below, and if this story brought back even a small piece of that era for you, consider passing it along to someone else who might remember this quietly remarkable little car as well.